Careful, we are live and we are recording the meeting. We can start the proceeding.
Thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody to the June 25th Planning Coordination Advisory Committee meeting. First, I'll just call roll. We have Councilmember Sonia Miles here, Councilmember Spain, Board member, I'm so sorry, Board Member Spain. Supervisor Walkinshaw is not here. Supervisor Glass is here. Supervisor Franklin. And you are joining us virtually.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Aguirre is here, and Councilmember Underhill. Councilmember Peterson is not here tonight. Councilmember Smith is here, and Vice Mayor Hedrick not here. Councilmember Cummings not here, and Mayor Trott is Mayor Petrott. Are you on virtually?
Yes, I'm here virtually.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, the first item, we do have an action item. I think this was from last meeting because we didn't have a quorum. Is that right? So it is, well, first we have the summary notes from May 28th. Are there any changes to those notes? Okay, so is there a motion to pass those?
Second.
Right. Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I'll abstain.
All right, and the next one is the BRT action plan. And so we do have a motion tonight to recommend the action plan to the NVTA for approval. Are there any questions before we do that? And Mr. Jasper, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that first.
We've got a brief presentation.
Okay,
just,
great.
to make sure all the members are up to speed. Let me just quickly go through this. First, I'd like to introduce again Dahlia Levin from our consultant team, who is here to answer your difficult questions, and I'll take care of the rest. So this is about the BRT action plan. Previously, we called this, or initially we called this preliminary deployment plan. It's the same thing. I'm going to cover these 4 areas here. I'll just go forward a couple of slides. Yeah, so this is a quote from the first page of the action plan, the draft action plan, in fact, that was used for public comment in April. And highlighted in yellow are some key points that I want everyone to be aware of is what this plan actually is. And I'll touch on some things that it isn't. It's a strong blueprint to develop BRT lines incrementally that will eventually function as an integrated system. I want to be clear that it is not a detailed design. It is not a detailed operational plan. Details have yet to be worked out, and really we'll get to work the details out should this committee endorse and NVTA approve the action plan at its meeting in July. Also, just to be clear that we have made some assumptions to evaluate the action plan regarding the extent of bus priority measures. We have not assumed dedicated right-of-way everywhere. We don't think that was a good assumption for the purposes of this piece of work. That's not to say it won't happen, but that really is a locally driven choice in the first instance. So we've operated something with partial bus priority throughout, but that's what we're talking about. And then Haru, if you just click through, this is the same as that. So that one's bigger. So we'll stick with that one. Go to the next slide. And again, you've heard me say this before. Think big. That's the think big over there. The 28-line BRT system for Northern Virginia. Start small. When we say start small, I'm referring to our transaction long range plan, which was adopted in December of 2022. That was where the kind of the fledgling bus rapid transit system began to emerge to us. because there are quite a number of BRT lines in the project list associated with that plan. And since this project list is the first eligibility filter for what NVTA can fund using its regional revenues, we have to assume that at some point, some of those projects in this plan are going to become funding requests. And recognizing that we were already funding 5 BRT lines to the tune of more than $800 million, with the prospect of more to come, we wanted to look at this system-wide. So that was why we wanted to think big, starting small in the action plan and building momentum through the 5 lines that we're already funding. And they're listed on the screen here. I won't go through those. Next slide, please, Haroon. To say this is a highly collaborative effort is an understatement. It is the most collaborative effort I think I've ever worked on. As you can see in the top row are 4 counties. Beneath that are 5 cities, our 5 largest towns, and then our regional partners, VDOT, DRPT, NVTC, the Council of Governments, particularly through the Transportation Planning Board, and more recently the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority as well. The transit agencies in the region, I won't read them all, there's quite a few of them there. And also we have reached out across the river to involve the District of Columbia's Department of Transportation, Montgomery County, and Prince George's County, recognizing that the nature of travel demand does not end and begin at the Potomac River. There are people who cross the river on a daily basis for work and other reasons. And so BRT in Northern Virginia has to consider those travel demands as well. Next slide, please. So we've built this up through this collaborative process, starting with our long-range plan transaction I mentioned earlier, some work that NVTC did, the regional bus analysis, work that WMATA did for better bus redesign, which I'm sure you're all aware is kind of in the process of being rolled out now. The multi-jurisdictional and multi-agency bus rapid transit working group, which held 6 meetings during the course of the 18 months in which this plan was developed. We've had a couple of rounds of focus groups and community engagement and guidance from this committee and other statutory committee and other committees as well. DMV Moves and SJ28 looking at transit funding. These are both initiatives that started after we started the BRT work, but nonetheless they are important, and NVTA is participating in both of those. Coming out of the DMV Moves initiative have been a number of bus priority components in a number of corridors across Northern Virginia, the District, and Maryland. And although that is a different geographic footprint to us, the pieces that are in Northern Virginia are complementary with what's in our action plan. So we don't see any conflict with that. So highly collaborative. Next slide, please. Key dates. We briefed you on this at your meeting in May. That was what we were focusing more on, the feedback from the public comment. At your meeting in March, we briefed you on the technical analysis. And at various points during the course of 2024, we also briefed you at a higher level that was consistent with the earlier phase of the work at that time. So I hope you feel as though we've given you every opportunity to hear what we're doing and provide us with feedback, which you have, and we appreciate that. And we are requesting that you endorse this plan this evening. Subsequent to this meeting, we'll be meeting with one more committee, our Planning and Programming Committee, which is not a statutory committee, it's a standing committee, and is the committee which typically makes the final recommendation to NVTA, kind of consolidating the endorsements from this committee and our Technical Advisory Committee. And then we're seeking NVTA approval at its meeting on July 10th. At this point, I'm just going to let Ms. Levin give you a quick recap in 2 slides on the things I just mentioned, the survey findings, and the technical analysis.
All of these are things we've shared with you before and that you can see in the document itself. But just as a reminder, in April and May, so quite recently, we put out the draft version of this plan for public comment. There was a survey associated with that, to which we got 587 results. And we asked some very specific questions of folks about, where the route was going, how frequently they were coming, what the times of day they were surveyed, but also left open the opportunity for people to provide any comment they would like. From those 587 surveys, we got just over 1,500 specific comments. And the commentary was overwhelmingly positive from folks. So I'll remind everyone that we heard 72% of those respondents indicated they would be very likely or extremely likely to use the BRT system if it were available. It's a little higher for current riders than non-transit users, but that's fully expected. But of those of those comments, right, 31% left a positive comment. And I cannot stress this enough, for anyone who's ever been involved in a public engagement effort before, only 5% left a generally negative comment, which is extraordinary. So we were all very excited to see that positive reaction to this big vision that NVTA has put forward. There are a number of specific reactions and commentary to specific routes and things like that, all of which will get passed on to are being compiled by NVTA, but will also be passed on to the jurisdictions who will ultimately carry some of these forward, so that that commentary gets incorporated into plans as we move forward with that. I'm gonna go to the next one. Also not new are some of the evaluation results that we saw from looking at this system as a whole. So looking at how the system might perform in 2045. The 28 route system that you see on that big map over there is predicted to have 47 million riders annually by 2045, which is a significant number. It's more bus trips than there are right now in Northern Virginia total. 27,000 of those daily trips would be shifting people from driving to transit. So that's pulling cars off of the road, which has impacts on improving congestion, on reducing emissions, on improving roadway safety, right? Fewer cars, generally fewer crashes, which have economic and monetary savings as well associated with them. There are improvements to accessibility. So the number of jobs that folks are able to access on transit goes up with this kind of frequent regional transit service. And just a whole host of other benefits. I'm happy to go into as much detail as anyone would want, but I'm gonna leave it there for right now.
So just to recap, the major findings are generally positive, support from community members, including those who declare themselves to be primarily drivers, provided bus rapid transit is fast, frequent, and reliable. The technical analysis backs that up. The technical analysis that looked out to 2045 showed that the 28 lines that were evaluated both individually and collectively will lead to modal shift. Modal shift is really important to NVTA because if people are moving from driving to riding, then they're driving less. And if they're driving less, there's less congestion. And we were created to reduce congestion. So that's really important for us that, the technical analysis backs up the public sentiment. Further, although we've not done anything like a full evaluation that we would for our 6-year program, which is where we make funding decisions, we do consider that many of the BRT lines that were evaluated in their current form using a kind of like a proxy process that somewhat mirrored our much more comprehensive evaluation process for funding applications indicates that many of these BRT lines would be in what I would call the competitive range, which means that they're scoring in a similar way to projects that we have funded in the past. On top of that, from working primarily through our BRT planning working group, at the staff level, there is a very broad consensus that this is an appropriate way forward for the region. It fully reflects NVTA's multimodal approach to things. We fund all modes of transportation, but given the genesis of this work, the ability to provide a meaningful alternative to driving gets widespread support among your staff at all levels. But as always, devil's in the details, and your staff want more details, and quite rightly, they should want more details. And we will have those details if we move to the next phase of this work. But we haven't worked, diving down into the weeds, because we're trying to establish at the regional level that there is sufficient broad support from this committee, from other committees, and from NVTA that this is the direction they would like us to move forward in. And if that is the pathway we're directed to go down, then we can get into some of those details at that point. So the final thing I would say, if Haroon, you just advance one more slide, is that if we do all these things in terms of advancing this forward, then we're also going to be enhancing the potential for the region to successfully compete for state and federal funding. This has been brought to our attention by a couple of folks at senior kind of leadership level within the region. And we concur. Put simply, if one of your jurisdictions were to request smart scale money from the state or some form of federal grant, and you could point to a blueprint for the region and say, this is part of that blueprint, this is what we're working towards, we think that will enhance the chances of winning that funding. Just quickly just go through this one slide here is a bit in the weeds, but full transparency, we wanted to be clear. The version of the document that went to the public in April, the draft version, is what we have updated. We're now asking for your endorsement, but we have made some changes to the version that went to the public for a number of reasons. The only significant ones are the addition of the spring 2025 survey findings. Obviously, at the time we went to the public, we were seeking that information, so we couldn't include it in the document at that time. So the summary has now been added, as have the recommendations, which are about to go through. In the April version of the report, the draft version went to the public. We just had a placeholder for recommendations because we didn't have any at that time. Getting the public feedback was important before we to do that. And then some minor revisions and additions that are mentioned here, which have come about from a number of sources, including feedback from your staff, and some clarifications that we've tried to build into the document before it goes forward for a vote. So I'll let you read those. I do consider these are all minor in nature. In some cases, the third to last bullet regarding our 6-year program was changing the tense from something that will happen in the future to something that happened in the past, because we launched the call for projects during the course, since we went public and tonight. So that's for the most part minor stuff, but just for transparency, we want to be clear. And so in terms of recommendations, the overarching recommendation for you to consider is that your endorsement will hopefully lead to the ability to continue to build the momentum that has been established over the last 18 months by refining the action plan to get down deeper into the details. We've split this out into two groups. NVTA recommendations towards NVTA to focus on more detailed deployment planning than we've been able to do so far, and also recommendations for jurisdictions and agencies. So let me dive straight into the NVTA ones first. And these are listed here, covering the topics of funding, additional evaluation, knowledge transfer, development of guidelines and best practices, and ongoing outreach and education, etc. Funding's important. Many people have said to us, who's going to pay for this? Well, that's a very good question. Certainly when it comes to infrastructure, including rolling stock, bus maintenance and storage facilities, NVTA has a track record of funding those sorts of things, as have others. When it comes to operations, that's always more challenging, getting funding for operations. And you know, kudos to the DMV Moves and SJ28 initiatives, which are looking at sustainable transit funding. So yeah, we didn't want to duplicate that work. We wanted to let that play out. It is playing out. There has been from SJ28 an important update this week. I think there's going to be more important updates from DMV Moves over the fall. So you know, we want to kind of tag along behind that and leverage that as we go forwards. As mentioned earlier, exploring and supporting funding requests that are not NVTA is something we see is quite important, particularly targeting state and federal agencies or state and federal sources. And in the context of federal, particularly Federal Transit Administration, is to look to see what we can do on behalf of the region to make the process of requesting what's known as capital investment grants from FTA for the region to be able to be more successful in winning some of those. That's a highly competitive thing that is very difficult for an applicant to kind of go through the process. So if we can share some of that burden with them, that's something we'd like to initially begin looking at. In terms of the additional evaluation, certainly we've had a number of sensible suggestions that talk about, why did you go down that route? Did you consider this route? Why that terminal point? Why not this terminal point? In some cases, we think a route along this corridor where there isn't one would be a good idea. Now, a lot of those things we have evaluated, we've certainly considered, we haven't evaluated in the sense of we have not had the opportunity, we don't have the resources at this point to kind of keep redoing the model evaluation. So we need kind of to move to the next step to be able to do that. And we need to begin to, give some more thought to the operations and governance considerations associated with these lines. That's something that would build upon established practices that around the region, but really we're driving here to seek to ensure interoperability and integration of this system going forward, so we do not end up with potentially a series of disconnected lines. Knowledge transfer is going on all the time, but we do believe that there is more that we can learn from the projects that we are funding, that we can recycle to other jurisdictions that are considering applications. We want to capture that experience specifically, whether it covers development, deployment, or operations. And also look to establishing a peer exchange group beyond Northern Virginia. We have actually been approached by a couple of regions already to talk about BRT experiences, want to learn from us, we want to learn from them, kind of a thing. There are national associations that do this kind of stuff, which we'll tap into as well. But when we've got particular regions that are particularly interested because we are quite relevant to each other, then we don't want to rely on someone else organizing those meetings for us. Guidelines and best practices, obviously it's perfectly reasonable. We had a case that came up just before the Technical Advisory Committee meeting last week, where the question was along the lines of, if we're thinking about putting a BRT station on this particular route, What square footage do we need to allow for that? Great question. I don't know is the answer. But if we start developing those sorts of guidelines, then we may be able to give some more helpful answers. So that's the sort of thing we want to do there. Branding, we're not talking about going out and rebranding transit agencies, buses or anything like that, but we do need to think about, how there can be some sort of umbrella branding across as a regional overlay, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not a branding expert. We think it's something we maybe need to look at potentially in the future. And then this whole thing about the ongoing need to educate and inform and to build consensus and so on is so very important. We've already learned that from other regions who are doing BRT around the country. Some of this stuff we can do in-house. Some of it will require external support. I'll be quite open to that. Okay, so that's the NVTA recommendations. And for jurisdictions and agencies, we've talked through this with your staff and your leadership at the staffing level. So there's no surprises from presenting this to you tonight. We do think it's important. One of our authority members said as much himself, is that if you think about a silver line for Metro Rail, it started on a drawing kind of like that. It was a big picture in someone's head 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Connect the airport to DC.
To
connect the airport to the DC.
There you go. And how long ago was that?
Yeah, like 60 years.
So we're not saying this is going to appear next week, next month, next year. It may not even be this decade, but you've got to start somewhere, is the attitude that we're taking with this. And so part of that we're requesting from you is that as you update comprehensive plans, small area plans, transit plans in the future, that you give consideration to the inclusion of BRT lines and facilities so that it can begin to build. It's not any kind of commitment to funding anything, just to begin the planning process around that. In terms of transaction, I mentioned this earlier, as the first eligibility filter, if you want NVTA funding for BRT or any other project, it's got to be in the project list associated with this plan. So we're asking your staff to check to make sure that these 28 lines are in the project list, and if they are not, take steps to work with us to as we look to update transaction over the next couple of years, so that it's NVTA funding eligible, ready, check that box, move on, kind of a thing. We also ask that when submitting those BRT related funding requests to us, that the applicants demonstrate consistency with the action plan, including the implementation and the operations piece. Now, really, really important, not that any of this isn't important, but project development. We look to our member jurisdictions to lead project development. We do not lead project development. That has to be inherently a locally driven thing. So we want you to lead the development of BRT lines and BRT related facilities in conjunction with neighboring jurisdictions where appropriate, because many of these lines cross jurisdictional boundaries, but to do that on your own terms when you are ready. We're not forcing you to do it now, next week, next year, not this funding cycle, not any funding cycle. It has to be locally driven. And part and parcel of this may be that as that happens, the existing bus services that are in your jurisdictions, it makes sense to look at those to see whether they need to be restructured, whether they will be complementary to BRT or not. Again, is a locally driven decision. Our assumption in our modeling work is that BRT would be an overlay. In the real world, it probably wouldn't be. There probably wouldn't be a need for it to duplicate anything. But there may be some value in looking at a restructuring. And again, that has to be locally driven. We're not telling you to do it, how to do it, whether you should do it. I think that has to be something that our local jurisdictions know best. And that's what we would ask you to do. And finally, as has been the case for the last 18 months as we've developed this plan, and indeed for about 2.5 years, maybe prior to that, as we were developing the transaction plan, that BRT planning working group that we created 4 years ago, maybe on a hiatus while our process takes out. But if you do agree that this should continue, then the BRT planning working group will continue to be the staff level coordination point, where all those logos I showed you earlier, the staff from all those jurisdictions, many of them already participate, all are invited to participate. And if we've missed anyone off, we will correct that. But yeah, it's been amazing because we regularly get more than 50 people showing up to those meetings, which I think is a measure of the interest in this topic for this region. So continue to engage with us through that working group is something that we hope that you would encourage your staff to do if they need any encouragement at all. I think that's my last slide. Yep. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. All right, any questions? Yeah.
Thank you. So I know that there was some public feedback and some stakeholder comments that were incorporated. Could you talk a little bit about how public feedback was incorporated into this plan? And then also what room there is to amend this document after it's passed to, let's say, change corridors or amend some of the text and other things as well.
Sure. We did receive both from the public and from jurisdictional staff as well, comments, things like, well, why don't we extend this one stop further, or things like that, places they would like to see stops. These are very relevant comments, and as part of that project development process that Keith was talking about, those should be considered, right? So we did not incorporate all of those directly. We just don't have the resources to continue evaluating all 28 corridors. But as we said, those have been documented and will be shared with the jurisdictions as they move into, as you all move into project development phases. I think that's the answer to that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, can I add
Sure.
to that? I think the other important aspect of the public comment was to gauge the public sentiment in general. So it wasn't necessarily looking for detailed feedback on the document. It was, after all, a 28-page action plan that we shared. So there was a lot of material there. And the survey process was intended to kind of help people walk through it, so that it didn't require them to read a 28-page document. But what we were really trying to get at was, is this a waste of time? Is this something that interests or even excites you? And to break that out by, we looked across the region to see how feedback varied across the region, and also, in particular, we wanted to see how sentiment varied between those who are already riders and those who are not riders, because we sense that there might be a difference of opinion. We don't want to lose a single rider who is an existing rider, but if we don't win some new riders, then what do we achieve essentially in terms of NVTA's core mission?
So it sounds like as this goes to the local jurisdictions, the comments that you did receive will be passed along to the local jurisdictions as they go through their planning. Okay.
absolutely.
And then in terms of, then it's in the locality's jurisdiction to make changes to their section of the plan.
And as Mr. Jasper said, right, there were a lot of assumptions made. Not all of these are final, decisions. They're just a starting point for a lot of those.
So then the two other things, if there are, my main concern right now is that if there are planned projects that are conflicting with this BRT, the transaction plan, that should be I would say that should be documented soon, just so that the localities are aware of it and that for whatever next transaction update we have, we're aware of that. And so it would be nice to have some sort of clear commitment to go through and make sure that whatever projects are planned currently right now do match up with this plan that we are passing. Or at least are flagged to be a potential issue for the jurisdictions.
Yeah, we've already kind of done that at a high level. But you kind of touched on the reason why we can't go the whole way just yet is because we kind of need to get to a point where we can evaluate some of the options before we know for sure what is, at least for now, our current best thinking of routes, station locations, terminal points, and so on. So I completely agree that needs to happen. And just to give you a bit of insight on the transaction timeline, the next updates transaction is scheduled to be adopted by NVTA in December of 2027. And working backwards, it's approximately a 2-year process. So that would mean that it would be approximately kicking off around the beginning of calendar year 2026. So 6 months from now, it'll be kind of at launch. So there's nothing time sensitive in the next 6 months. Realistically, there's probably nothing time sensitive in the next 12 months when it comes to updating transaction. But so it's what's more time sensitive is to make sure there is a common agreement of what the definition of the 20-out routes should be. That would be a more time. But even there's still lots of time.
So within the next 12 months, we would be able to have a clear vision of where the, I guess, conflict points are, where maybe there are certain plans that don't necessarily meet up.
Easily, yes,
Okay.
easily.
And so that could be incorporated in time for the next.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, sorry, let me look through my notes. The other thing would be, and I mentioned this in an email, regular updates on local jurisdiction planning initiatives that might impact BRT. And this is a mouthful, the RJACC.
We just call it the RJ.
RJAC, okay. It was mentioned as an agency that sort of might be able to oversee that. My concern with that specifically is that RJAC doesn't have published minutes. The meetings are in.
Well, if I could, council member, what I will say, the RJAC is used because it's a committee of the CEO where we get together and talk about things of a regional nature. But there is actually a bill, I can't remember the name of the bill, that requires all localities to notify us if you make changes to your plans, your comprehensive plans that are not consistent with transaction. So while the RJAC may have a discussion, we do this every year. We send out the notification, we send out the form, and it's on the localities to inform us if there are any changes made to their comprehensive plans that are not consistent with our long-range transportation plan.
Would it be worthwhile bringing that up to the NVTA board or to this committee if that does come up?
We do. So when we're notified, we report to the authority
Okay.
if there are if we've been informed of any changes to the comp plan that are inconsistent with transaction, or if there are no changes. We do that every year.
Okay.
And we can bring that to this committee as well.
Okay, great. So there is a plan to keep us updated. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Madam Chair, Mayor Burkhardt online has a
Please.
question.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to ask, what sort of thinking and planning has gone into outreach and education for the localities and for the multiple jurisdictions so that they can see the value add for BRT, and in particular for incorporating BRT into their comprehensive plans and interlinking other transportation schemes that are used within the particular locality so that it can interact with and connect to BRT, making it truly multimodal in that sense.
Sure, thank you for that question. To date, the discussion has been, we've mentioned this evening with you as elected representatives of your jurisdictions with this discussion primarily has been with your senior leadership, just to gauge whether they agree, and to get a kind of like a pulse on willingness to do that. And I think for the most part, subject to the details, that there is a willingness and understanding to do that. So in terms of the planning part of it, I think that and what Councilmember Underhill was just talking about, and Ms. Backman mentioned, it's actually specifically HB 1915 from the year 2015 is the particular piece of legislation that requires your jurisdictions to tell us if you're doing something in your plan which is in conflict with our plan. There's no penalty associated with that. There is the requirement for us to report it, which we do typically in November of each year. In terms of ongoing outreach and education, we don't have at this stage a game plan for how we would do that in a subsequent phase of this work, beyond it being a continuation of what we've done so far. I think one area where we would look to do more is with the business community. We do a lot with citizens and stakeholder advocacy groups, but it will be good to reach out to the business community. We have some business community contacts, but we don't kind of have a structured approach at the moment to addressing the business community. And I think we would certainly, reach out for your help in making that feasible. Our surveys from both this spring and last spring indicated to us quite strongly that most Northern Virginians do not know what BRT is. When you explain it to them, they like it. But they don't. Most don't understand it right now, and that's going to be a long process. And I think it needs to be targeted. But mostly, it's most likely to happen at the local level. To be honest, as and when jurisdictions are ready to advance projects, you'll almost certainly be doing that kind of public outreach yourselves, even regardless of what we're doing. So I think it's going to be kind of driven at a local level, to be honest. But we're more than happy to provide materials to support it and do our part of that process. But I don't. It's like most of the things to do with this plan. It's not NVTA telling everyone else what to do. It really has to be collaborative. It will not work if it's not collaborative.
Right. Anyone else? Yes, board member, speak.
Yes, hello, and thank you, Jasper, and everyone for your brief. I just want to just kind of dovetail off of what Councilmember Underhill, I think, was getting at, and maybe this is somewhere I just haven't seen it. The survey findings, right? The 587. Is there a separate data set somewhere for us to see? Go ahead.
I will say the survey closed on May 18th.
Right.
We moved very quickly to incorporate changes and move the plan forward. There is both a full summary report of those findings coming. It is in process, and that I'm sure will be shared when it is complete. And then, as we said, the data set of the specific sort of open-ended comments, I believe, will also be shared as soon as we've been able to sort of clean and process all of that data.
Yeah, well, thank you, because I think this also goes back to what the mayor was saying, and something we in Arlington, I tell folks all the time that effective communication is the key to success. And so when you take on a large scale project like this, I do wholeheartedly believe that there has to be intentional engagement at the local level, right? In order for this to be disseminated down to the grassroots level, so folks really understand it. Because I agree, most folks don't know what NVTA mean or NVTC. You go start talking about subcommittees, they're lost in the sauce without the meatballs and spaghetti. So look, the only reason I bring this up because when I think of 587, and I'd also think about the magnitude of who this is going to involve and even your ridership, I'm just wondering, is 587 the right size number to, should it be larger? And that's another conversation. perhaps to have ad nauseum, because if we're gonna make data informed decisions on processes, like who, in an equitable lens, like who participated in the survey, where were they at? There's a lot of mechanisms. And are we really informed in the right way from the community? Businesses, back to what you were saying, we have the Northern Virginia Chamber, Arlington Chamber, all these folks. I mean, look, that's I think to go in to get to the businesses, because they need to know about this just like the average day citizen, right? As I close, I met with staff and some of our folks, and the overall plan is, don't get nervous. We're going to be supportive of it. And we're comfortable with the analysis, but, there are some areas, especially with the recommendations on pages 28 and 29, where we're still working out a few things that we want to put forward. There's nothing that's going to be, I think, earth-shattering in our recommendations, but we need a little bit more time for that. That doesn't mean I'm not going to vote and, to move this forward tonight. I just want you to know that, we locally here in Arlington are looking at a few things, and our edits are going to be forthcoming for the recommendations for pages 28 and 29 specifically, okay? Other than that, I do appreciate, the hard work that went into this and all that, but for what it's worth, I'll shut my mouth now so others can perhaps ask more informed questions. Thank you very much,
No,
Madam
thank
Chair,
you.
for allowing me to speak.
Good comments. So that's wonderful. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, it's great to be here with everyone. This is my first meeting. Apologies that I haven't been able to come before. I was in Richmond for a couple of those, which, when Richmond calls, you kind of have to show up. My name's Kanek. I'm in the city of Alexandria. First of all, huge supporter of BRT, love BRT. I think it's really a lot of the future, especially given some of the financial constraints and what we could do around it. We'll brag a little bit. In Alexandria, of course, we were the first in the region not only to have BRT, but also to have dedicated lanes. So I am excited about a lot of this vision. I had a couple of small concerns, I think easily kind of taken care of. And my apologies, Mr. Jasper. Are you NVTA staff or are you?
MBTA.
NVTA is.
Good. Again, first meeting.
Just me.
Gotcha.
NVTA.
So I guess with some of what we're talking about here with conducting evaluation of alternative routes, alignments, station location, termini, and I appreciate what you said that some of this should be locally driven. Has NVTA in the past researched or analyzed or done studies on this before? Or so can you give an example?
During the course of the development plan, we've done it at a high level.
Well, before this plan.
As part of transaction, our long range plan, this is where it really began to emerge. But at the detailed level, no, we evaluate projects that are submitted to us for funding, including from your own city, but we are not, and we don't present ourselves to be the detailed planners.
And do we have any existing groups in the region that are actively kind of doing some of this work?
Absolutely, yeah. Many of them, well, actually all of them are represented in our BRT planning working group. So I'm not sure who you're specifically referring to, but Fairfax County with Route 1 BRT, your own city, Arlington County, City of Falls Church, NVTC, Montgomery County, and the District of Columbia. All of these are doing different forms of BRT and bus priority measures. So we've drawn upon that regional body of knowledge in developing this work.
Okay, so MBTC hasn't done any studies or analysis on
MBTC completed a regional bus analysis, which wrapped up at around the time that we got going back in the fall of 2023. And at the same time, Ramada was completing its Better Bus analysis. Dahlia works for Cambridge Systematics. Cambridge Systematics is the consultant for NVTC and to Armada for both those studies. And so there's an enormous body of knowledge in this person sitting next to me, which is part of the reason why we hired them. So yeah, I mean, we don't profess to be experts ourselves in everything. We recognize where the knowledge is, and we seek to draw it in our work.
And if I could add on to what Mr. Jasper said, currently we're funding 5 different BRT lines.
I know very well, and I greatly
Yes,
appreciate it because most of them are in Alexandria.
Yes, this is true. And when we were doing what is now the current transaction, which the authority adopted in December of 2022, we had a conversation about Metro Rail expansion, but we understood it's just not feasible.
Right.
Now, again, transaction is a 25-year plan, but we do update it every 5 years. So we were thinking, what can we do in the interim to try to provide some high capacity transit option? Now, as Keith noted, this plan, what it is not is a detailed operational plan.
Totally.
You know, we don't get into operations and we haven't professed to. We would like to go into next steps. But even if we were to get into operations, when a locality, and I assume working with VDOT, because we can only be responsible for what's in Northern Virginia regarding the funding component, you know, that even those plans would need to be updated and fine-tuned, specifically if you're talking about trying to compete or apply for some federal funding and even some state funding. But we tried to make sure that this was holistic as possible so the people or the entities with expertise in bus operations, if you will, they were at the table. Like I said, this was not only in Northern Virginia, we had Montgomery County, we had WMATA, we had the TPB staff. We wanted it to be holistic, knowing that what we could fund is only in Northern Virginia. But again, this plan here just get us the foundation, if you will.
No, and I love that. I'm a big believer in regionalism, as you know. I was sitting with Director Sindcraft this afternoon for lunch. While I appreciate that all those folks were kind of at the table, I don't know if this has trickled up to some of leadership, because I know that our CEO of Dash was unaware of some of these things, maybe just a general overview. I know Randy over at WMATA wasn't sure about it, so I don't know.
We briefed Randy.
I
briefed Randy.
Oh.
I myself briefed Randy,
All right.
and Mr. Nampathieri was also on the call, so I can't
I have to
speak.
talk to Randy.
Yeah, please do. Me too, it's seeming.
Yeah.
But with Dash, did we touch base with Dash? Because we met with all of the DOT heads and a lot of the, I'm saying a lot, some agency heads as well. But I wasn't in those meetings, but I was in the meeting directly with WMATA.
All right, yeah. I'll have to ask him because I had heard that he wasn't aware of some of what's going on.
He was.
Yeah.
Maybe he forgot.
And I guess when we talk about convening, so would this body be the one as the convener, or because I thought there was already some groups that already existed that were doing some of this strategy and analysis and everything?
I'm sorry, convening.
Well, he mentioned convening several times, so I guess the groups that are already in existence in terms of working together, I understand that you brought different jurisdictions together to talk about this, so that already kind of exists naturally, if you will, when we're discussing, when Alexandria did its transit vision, we discussed things with MATA, we discussed things with Arlington. So I guess what I'm trying to say, if I could be more blunt and direct, is my concern is around duplicative services and processes, right? If there's already something existing or utilizing that, and you do touch on it a little bit in here.
I don't believe there's anything we're doing that is duplicative. There are things going on in the same general space, but if I may, NVTC's transit analysis was not a BRT study. The only mention that really was a BRT in that study was this work. In any case, we pulled that in to what we did anyway. We started with the BRT outline network, which was in our December 22 plan. And we added to that, right, with the work that NVTC had done in identifying high priority corridors, and what, you know, what WMATA was looking at as part of Better Bus.
What WMATA was looking at, what each of the transit operators had incorporated into transit development plans or transit strategic plans, and specifically in Alexandria, where there are some corridor studies that have advanced pretty far. Every attempt was made to incorporate the plans as they existed when we could. I will recognize that West End Transitway in particular did some work simultaneously with us that we were unable to keep up with, and that's great, right? That's why this plan needs to continue to be updated as that work keeps going. We don't want to slow anybody down with this. And the only last point I'll add is that in those recommendations that Keith went over very quickly, there are a lot of next steps. And I think the key piece is who is the right entity for each of those next steps. And there is a role for NVTC, and there is roles for the local jurisdictions, and there are roles for the transit operators, et cetera. And I think identifying what those needs are and then placing responsibilities and getting commitments from those folks to take those actions is where that needs to go next.
Yes, no, I agree. And I mean, this is all, as you said, high level. This is a starting place, right? Like I said, I'm excited about the potential around a lot of this. Yeah, and I appreciate also, like I said earlier, the use of the localities as a driving force as well, because we know our localities best, right?
You absolutely do.
Being able to collaborate, whether it's with WMATA or any other group, as we do overlays and everything. And I've talked a lot now. I know Supervisor Franklin has her hand up. Last thing, I do believe when we did the Metroway that NVTC played a critical role in the analysis around that. So it's not just that they did something, you know, recently utilizing, and I don't know if Cambridge was involved back when Metroway was formed, but
It was not us.
so
We
there's
learned others' work.
there's a history of some of that is kind of what I'm getting at. So yeah.
Yeah, and I will know, again, we have, and NVTC does great work, but there are 3 NOVA localities that are not a part of
Part of
NVTC.
absolutely.
And we want to make sure that they're adequately represented as well.
I think that's a great segue for it. Sorry, Madam Chair, but
No, that's all right. Thank you. Right, Supervisor Franklin has her hand raised. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you all so much, and my apologies for not being in person. I see that there are some new people there that I haven't met, so looking forward to meeting everyone. I do want to express my support for this project. I do also want to just make sure that we're managing expectations, at least in my portion of the district. I represent the Route 1 corridor. Like as soon as you leave Lorton coming into Woodbridge, I have it going pretty much south until Dumfries. So I do just want to make sure that at least my residents understand that while we're doing this BRT project, that it doesn't necessarily go into Woodbridge, even though we have the room and the space. And I would hope that we could have a conversation at some point about how to fully expand the BRT into Prince William County, particularly along the Route 1 corridor. Now, you know, we have some concerns even with that in terms of adding additional construction as we just finished widening our roads, but I think BRT could be another effective mode of transportation for a lot of my riders. So I do just want us to kind of keep that in mind as we talk about this project, particularly in that corridor. And just kind of understand that I have to explain that while we're doing BRT, we're not actually doing it in Prince William County. So happy to, you know, hear thoughts about that, but wanted to make sure that we're messaging this in a way that no one kind of gets the wrong idea about what's happening in Prince William on this front.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else? Yes. Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, and thank all of you. Lots of work here, obviously. I wanted to pick up on a couple of comments. One of them, just so I have my bearings here, when you talk about having conferred with leadership in the jurisdictions, was that through this committee or was that independent of this committee?
We reach out to transportation directors from time to time on a range of topics, and so they tend to be just one-on-one briefings between us.
All right, just to note that there's a higher level of leadership.
Yeah, so in addition to briefing these committees, we didn't want you all to get bored this evening, but the same slides have been presented to this committee previously. We briefed the authority because we don't want to ask them to take action without at the same meeting that they're first hearing about it. So this committee, the Technical Advisory Committee, your transportation directors, what we call the RJAC, which is really the planners and engineers and so forth, we've tried to be holistic with the briefings.
Okay. And that's great, but it is not the public, and it is not the elected officials who are representing the public. And that is a big bridge to cross.
Well, I have to say, the reason why the authority's compositions are mayors and chairs, for the most part, the law says the members are the mayors and chairs, and then we have other members. It's because as the chief elected official, we have to work with them. Going out, and when we talk to the public, we did, and I don't know, Delia, if you talked about all of the pop-ups we had and things of that nature.
We did. So let me just say, appreciate that. There were 24 people in the city of Fairfax who were included in the survey. You did some pop-ups, though. That's very helpful. But to recap an earlier comment, very few people in our jurisdiction understand BRT. They are beginning to understand it more. And the more they understand, there's a mixture of favoritism and then very significant concerns. And like so many of these issues, the more specific things become in terms of the realities of implementation, the more people pay attention and the more we start to hear feedback that we did not hear earlier. So just to call out Route 50, Fairfax Boulevard, the question mark of whether there will be a designated bus lane that would remove a lane of traffic on Route 50 is an issue that, shall we say, is going to attract a very high level of public interest, right? So those are the things that are attracting interest and concern now. And so the conversation is really just beginning,
right?
Just attracting public input and involvement. And it goes to, I think, an earlier question. So there's a public engagement process, and that is something that we need to do, and it needs to go far beyond what has already been done. But it goes to the issue of flexibility. And this action plan now, how flexible and how amendable, how adaptable is it? And at a really basic level, for instance, where are the corridors, for instance, things like that, as opposed to things that are more tweaks, if you will. And so it will be important for us to understand at this stage, what is that level of flexibility? And to what extent are we entering the binding environment? And that's a point that shifts public reaction fairly dramatically. So it's very important to understand what we're actually doing here.
No, we are not there, what you just noted. If we were asking you to make a recommendation on an operational plan, then that, I think, is the point where people are saying, is it a dedicated lane? Because we had this conversation at this meeting before, will we take away lanes and all of that? We are not there at all. You know, at that point, you have to you can't talk about taking away lanes or dedicating lanes or adding a lane without having VDOT at the table. And we're not there regarding the operational component specifics of an action plan. This goes back to what we stated. This is the foundation. Would it take 30 years like Silverline? I'm hoping that it will not take 30 years. But we as the authority, we don't implement. It's up to you as the localities to say, okay, you know what, this is something we want to put in our comprehensive plan. We think we're ready to take a deeper dive into high capacity transit, bus rapid transit. How does that look from an operational standpoint? And again, bringing in the entities, NVTC, or not bringing in, continuing to work with these entities, not only NVTC, but you have transit providers, and I know you have Q, that get into the planning, the operational specific. Those are the conversations that we have to have. And getting to your point, Board Member Spain, that's a whole nother round of public comment and feedback. You just don't take this plan and say, that's it, and we're not talking to the public anymore. Because from a public perspective, things really get real. You know, concept is great. Now you're talking about, does this really impact me directly? Can I ride this? Is it fast, frequent, reliable? Can it get me to where I want to go? That, what we're doing now, we don't have that level of specifics. Thank you. It's empty specificity, but that's to get to your point.
So that's very helpful. I just want to an earlier comment about managing expectations, be extremely clear at this stage about what this is and is not. The second a map appears, it begins to take on a life of its own and imply obligations and directions. It's very important to understand if that is something that is flexible at this stage to communicate that. I will just say, we are at the stage where people are just waking up at the public level, but also at the leadership level. And in our case, we're a council manager form of government. So the council is just now beginning. We had a conversation with a transportation planner from an agency that is actively involved in one of the segments right now. I would just say that that was a very eye-opening conversation and has changed the perspective of leadership in the city around what we are in for, and introduced a level of caution that did not exist before that. I would also say, in terms of the public feedback that we receive, there's sort of a level that comes in through the corporate apparatus of NVTA, PCAC, et cetera, the surveys, but then there are communications that come into individuals, and they can be very different. And we're at the stage now where we're in crossover, where we're starting to hear personally. To just give you a sense on the I-495 South, express lane thing and all that, the numbers coming in through the formal apparatus are 37 for, 6 against, something like that. My personal emails, because I'm the rep there, is 80-0 against. So we're sensitive, very sensitive about where we are in terms of the evolution of this going forward. I think we would very much like to support this, but we have got to know, just to be really frank about it, that there's flexibility here to be able to address and adjust these issues, and that we want to be very careful about not getting ahead of ourselves in that regard. And as long as we're able to do that, I think we're enthused about this concept, but with some real guarded perspectives in terms of what the realities of implementation might actually be. So I'm hoping that the answer is yes, we can proceed with those understandings, because I think that's kind of where we are.
I would say, yes, there is flexibility. Again, this sets the foundation. When we, and I will go ahead and say it, when we get to the point of implementation one day, now I don't know who will be sitting around this table, but it doesn't mean that we're locked into the point that we can't make the necessary adjustments, whatever those adjustments may be.
Well, good. I mean, I think we're all familiar with the incremental nature of the transportation planning commitments that 30, 60, 100, those kinds of things. It's a point of sensitivity. And I think, again, we just want to be very clear about where we are and how that is appropriately managed.
I don't think I mentioned this earlier. Forgive me if I didn't. I may have mentioned it at the last meeting. Endorsing or approving this plan is not a financial commitment. The only financial commitments that NVTA makes are through its 6-year program process. So this is more of a blueprint in order to be thinking at a big picture about how this might develop from the bottom up, locally driven.
Appreciate that, but we're chicken and egg here a little bit because the money is going to go where the comprehensive plan and other various planning instruments go. And if we're being asked to do a sweep across all of those, including comprehensive plan and running it through planning commission and all that, that really kind of sets the die here of where the investment will go and where the financial commitments will follow. And at this stage, before we amend our comprehensive plan or take those other measures, we will want to be very highly aware of what we're getting into and build into that the necessary flexibility so that it doesn't become a de facto obligation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, but you know, it really gets to just like one governing body can't bind another governing body to certain things. You know, you may say, oh, this is great. Your next governing body may say this is horrible, or vice versa. So while this is an endorsement of this foundational plan, you aren't locked in, because even if you feel comfortable representing the city of Fairfax saying, you know, this is what the city can buy into, the next governing body representing or holding those council seats may say, yeah, or we need tweaks to this, that, and the other before we can continue with it. So it doesn't bind you.
So just then thank you for allowing me to ask the questions. And I have just one last one. And the 12-month period between now and 2-year update, whatever it is that you referenced early on, what I heard, just help me understand correctly. On the one hand, there's nothing really time sensitive, but I heard just the opposite actually, and that 12-month period is actually quite time sensitive because it's an active planning period during which we would want to identify inputs to updates that would take place. And in our case, that means for the next 12 months, we need to be very actively engaged in our city on this issue for people to have the necessary clarity for us to provide you inputs to that update process that will take place. If you could just kind of clarify, because what I'm hearing is that 12 months is an active planning period that we should be involved in.
Well, let me be clear. I guess it depends on how you define time sensitive. I meant it to mean this is not something you've got to do in the next couple of weeks or couple of months. This is something that is a measured and familiar process among the jurisdictional staff. You know, our procurement process is necessarily long, and I don't think we're going to be out the other side of that until the end of this calendar year. The transaction update process will then take another 2 years after that to complete, during which time maybe by the midpoint of those 2 years we'll need to be locking down the project list in order to evaluate the effects of the projects that are on the project list. And that itself takes time. So a minimum of 6 months, most likely another 6 months beyond that, and potentially another 6 months after that. So it's an 18-month period through the RJAC, which has been mentioned earlier. Your staff are actively involved with us every month. They know how our process unfolds. The next update to our long-range plan is the third one that will have occurred at NVTA while I've been an employee. You know, there's obviously staff turnover, but many of the staff you know, are familiar with our process over several years. So, you know, I can't make them do anything at any particular time. They all have other priorities they have to focus on. But you know, we're as clear as we can be about what our process is for updating our plans. And if it simply doesn't work for a jurisdiction, you know, if you're not ready to update the comprehensive plan,
I think that's where
we're not making you do it.
keep this going. We update transaction every 5 years. If you are trying to implement within the time frame of this transaction update that will start in the fall, really, but the beginning of next year to be adopted by the authority by the end of 2027, then yes, this is the time to try to do the work to get any projects in to align yourself with funding. Now, I have to say this, we're not the only funding entity in the region. You know, there's Commonwealth Transportation Board, they have their 6-year improvement program. But the point is regarding for this transaction update, if you think you're ready to do some of the implementation work, we can only fund what's in transaction with the 70%. That's where Keith was going. But we update transaction every 5 years. It may seem, well, the authority, let me take a step back. They adopt transaction every 5 years. For the update, it's like an every 2.5 year process.
But it's the issue I just want to be clear on is yes, and working with the staff is essential, et cetera. And I don't know an easy way to say this, but that is not a rubber stamp mechanism and it must involve leadership and the public. And there's a procedure we have to go through to make sure that that's fully integrated. And if we don't, then we run the risk of staff coming back with things that are not acceptable. And we want to avoid that by working at the outset to get people involved, get our elected leadership involved to work through this. This is a high level issue. It involves substantial potential changes in the jurisdiction. And I would just say the early indicators from the public when they start to look at the realities of implementation that are involved here is that it is triggering some pretty significant questions and concerns. And so that's an indication that really this needs to be a process that's structured to collaborate at that level. And I just want to be sure that we are doing that and able to do that.
Okay, yes, board member Spain.
I know everyone's looking at the clock.
It's okay.
and
It's a good
so
conversation.
I just want to align and thank Councilmember Peterson for what he stated. You know, in my time, only 170 some odd days on the county board, I will say just that, you know, when people wake up and smell the coffee and the realization and sees, you know, before them that, wow, how this is going to affect me, it's in this way when all attention. So I think how we navigate this space and make sure the right folks know is critically important. So I appreciate you lifting that up. You know, I did get a chance also to read that letter from the, you know, there's already stakeholders being involved, right? Like the Coalition for Smarter Growth, they already put some input in. That's just the beginning, right, of this. So my question is back to what I said earlier. Or maybe I could have asked you this after. Maybe I just want to get it on record. When can I get a report?
I have to go back and talk to my team.
See, that's what I'm talking about, right? As soon as possible. You get to me, okay?
We're working on getting them a version this month.
So you're thinking about July, August, September, huh?
July, August, yeah, seems reasonable, depending on how much vacation everybody has.
No later than September 30th.
Oh, no, it won't be September 30th. We gotta have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done with questions for tonight.
Okay, yes, Councilmember Aguirre.
Sorry, also talking a lot like my colleague, Mr. Spain over here.
Maybe it's just our Alexandria. That's why our meetings go 10 hours.
That's right. Two quick comments. First of all, with respect to Ms. Beckman, well, the stipulation is that chairs and mayors are appointed to the authority. There is a loophole. Otherwise, Mr. Snyder would not be.
They have a designee.
For so long, yes.
Yes.
But my second comment is more so for minutes purposes, where I just wanted to support the comments from Supervisor Franklin. I worked a long time in Prince William County. It is ripe for public transit and for taking advantage of things. And also the roadways, I mean, ton of space. And you know, you talk about the possibilities around dedicated lanes. That would be a game changer down there, in my personal opinion. I think we should take more advantage of that.
And Madam Chair, if I could, my comment was just to note that law, for some reason, and it's unlike other regional entities, it says the mayors and chairs, they can have designees, as we all know. But the law also specifies that we have this committee and a technical advisory committee. But when it gets to our committees, all committees make recommendations, and the authority, they have to make the decisions for things like this. I don't know if Supervisor Franklin ever took her hand down or if she has another question.
I do not, and my apologies.
Okay, all right, anyone else? We haven't heard from. Okay, we see you, Mayor, Vice Mayor from Hedrick. I know you're back there. Did you have anything? You're good. Okay. All right. Okay, I think we can move on.
Madam Chair, this is the time I find this document out. The ask of this committee
Yes,
is to have
yes,
a motion.
yes.
I am prepared.
Thank you.
I think what we have before us is the appropriate vehicle to, and the conversations of it have to reinforce the fact that we do need a vehicle. And I think that the action plan before us is the appropriate vehicle for that. So I move that our committee recommends to the NVTA that they approve the BRT action plan.
Okay,
Second.
all right. All right, there's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? And I think, I was looking at it and I think the first slide that we were shown, and I had it right in front of me, was in highlighted in yellow. It's a blueprint. I think that wording to me, it makes it sound, of course, like this is just the original, the first plan, the first draft. And certainly there's going to be input because I understand what you're saying, but there was some concern, and I think I saw some other wording. I was looking through here, like words, numerous potential corridors and things like that, which I think is helpful to have some of that wording in there so that it doesn't, of course, sound like this is a done deal and the final plan. I don't know if that is helpful, but I thought I would just point that out. Okay, there's a motion on the table. Yes, Vice Mayor Hedrick.
Yeah, I just on page 27 of the action plan with the conclusions, I'm just looking over it and trying to do a good comb of it, and I'm going to support this, but as sort of an initial plan, I'm not sure going down these bullet points if we actually have all of the information that supports these conclusions in the plan. And so I understand that this is the appropriate vehicle and everything like that, but I do think that there's still the conclusions here are a little bit ahead of the skis for where we're at right now, based on the data that we have in front of us. So I just want to make that note as a reservation that I have moving forward.
Is it possible or specific?
Well, so I'm not sure if I've actually seen data showing that it would provide that it would shift trips from driving to transit.
We have. I'm not sure if you were here when we talked about it.
Yeah.
Today, but we talked about both the ridership levels, and we're looking at about 27,000 trips every day that would shift from driving to transit.
When the whole system is built out.
In 2045, when the whole system is built out, we do have additional information that will be a much longer technical report.
Yeah.
That looks at each route individually across all of those measures as well.
I guess that's my only point is I'm not calling to question whether the data is there. I'm saying what is concluded here in this action plan. I'm not sure if we've actually seen the technical report, the data that actually supports all of these, if you go line by line through it. So.
May I?
Okay. Are you finished, Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, yes.
Just
Councilor
to ask and offer in response, and I share your concerns, whether it would be appropriate for the conclusions and recommendations at this stage be listed as draft, because that would enable further consideration and conferral with leadership that might help address some of these reservations.
Making an amendment, because there is a motion on the table. So I'm not sure if you're making an amendment to that.
We're in
Motion.
discussion following. the
Right,
motion.
I
So
know. Are you
during
asking,
discussion,
who are you asking that to? To
I am
to the
asking the
group?
body, but I am
To the
I'm asking the body whether that would be something to consider as an amendment to address the concern that was raised.
Okay, all right, Councilmember Akira?
So I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I would just ask for specificity in terms of which bullet you're most concerned with, because I look at 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess bullet point 4, diamond number 4. Many of the corridors in Northern Virginia have the land use density and travel demand to warrant increased investment in rapid transit. On other corridors, increasing land use density could also improve ridership forecasts. I have zero qualms there, and I think it's.
So I think in a case like this, it's a combination of what's there and what is not there.
Mhm.
In both cases, it, I think, would be nice to have a chance to have whatever additional level of look at this would be helpful to flesh that out. Yeah, that's all.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, board member
I
Spain.
think where we're headed is somewhat, if we go to a draft form, I probably would be amenable to that simply because I've stated that we are in fact working with staff right now on some fine tuning and some friendly edits to the recommendations in 28 and 29. So I am open to that. Should a motion come forward?
Okay, anyone else? Any other comments?
Would this be an appropriate time to propose
Yes.
the amendment? So I would move that we amend the motion to include the designation of the conclusions and recommendations as draft.
Second.
Okay, yes,
Is
please,
that-
Supervisor Glass.
Thank you. Is that similar to the suggested motion, which says including next steps and recommendations?
Are you asking
I'm
Jim, what
asking
was on the
Council-
agenda?
Councilmember Peterson?
So that actually, thank you, because that wasn't actually read as a part of the additional.
No, it
motion,
wasn't.
And I think
That's
it would be
true.
helpful to do that. I think the issue of draft on conclusions and recommendations is perhaps separate and above because it clarifies that as a part of next steps and recommendations, we are operating off of an editable set of conclusions and recommendations here. The next steps thing doesn't necessarily state that as clearly as I think it might to address the concerns that were raised.
Okay, so any other comments on the amendment? Okay, so we will vote on the amendment first.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, just a point of
Councilmember.
clarity. So are we, for the original motion, should we include that or
Well, we'll-
not?
We'll have to get to
Come back to that one?
I think we have to get to that. So I think
Okay.
right now we are voting on
Draft.
the amendment
Okay.
to make it a draft. Okay. We can show hands, I think. Count? Well, no, we can't see those. So maybe we should do this. Maybe I should call this one out.
Madam Chair, not
Yeah.
in its entirety. We're talking about the draft portion, your conclusions and.
Just the conclusion.
Right, because I think you mentioned,
That's correct.
it sounded
Conclusions
as
and
though you said the entire
Okay,
thing was the
draft.
draft. Right.
Conclusions and recommendations. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, Councilmember Miles?
Nay.
Okay. Board Member Spain?
Yes.
Okay, Supervisor Glass?
Yes.
Okay, Supervisor Franklin?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Aguirre?
Aye.
Councilmember Underhill?
Same.
Okay, so that's really a no. Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Okay, Vice Mayor Hedrick,
Yes.
Mayor Batrat,
Yes.
okay, I will vote aye as well. Okay, so that passed. Now we're voting on the original motion. And I'm just gonna ask Councilmember Smith, do you want to add, I think we can allow you to, do you want to include the full motion where it says including next steps and recommendations? When you made your motion, you just didn't say that out loud, and I didn't know if you meant to say that.
I've been trying to convince myself that I was included in that. I think we could say that I did have it in mind with my original motion.
Okay, and you were the seconder, and do you agree with that? You're okay, you're fine with that. Okay, so now we're voting on the motion. Okay, all right. I think we can do we'll go ahead.
Madam Chair, can you restate the motion for the record?
Okay, the motion is, go ahead, Councilmember Smith, can you please restate the motion?
I move that the PCAC recommend that the NVTA approves the BRT action plan, including clearly defined. Can you characterize what you?
Oh, it's just,
No, I think just read.
I'll just
Because
read.
we've
Our
already
original
voted on
one
the
was
amendment.
including the steps and recommendations,
Here we go.
which I'm very comfortable with that motion.
Okay. Okay, all right, Councilmember Miles.
Aye.
All right. Board Member Spain.
Yay.
Okay, Supervisor Glass,
Aye.
Supervisor Franklin,
Aye.
Councilmember Aguirre,
Madam Chair, just since this is my first meeting and I haven't been involved for too long, I'm just gonna abstain for this one.
okay. Councilmember Underhill,
Yes.
okay, Councilmember Peterson,
yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hedrick,
Yes.
Mayor Batrat.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Okay, so that passed. All right, so. That passed. All right, now moving on. All right, we have NVTA's 5-year strategic plan update.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm gonna be really quick. I'm just giving you an update of where we are currently with our strategic plan. You might remember that I briefed you back in March when we were drafting our vision, mission, core values, and our goals. Okay, so I just wanted to update. Since then, we brought this to the authority and they adopted the vision, mission, core values, and goals at the May meeting. There was a minor tweak from what I initially briefed you in our mission statement. We wanted to add that our core values, specifically in our mission statement. So we added that this will reflect our core values of safety, equity, and sustainability. And then also in the definition of goal 1, we added in collaboration with jurisdiction and agencies. I think after all of our discussion that we had, this is a highly collaborative group and all of our initiatives are highly collaborative. We just wanted to call that out in the definitions. So that takes the top portion of our pyramid for our strategic plan that has been adopted, and that is kind of our way forward. The next steps that we're going into, and I just want to note too that our goals, everything that we've outlined here are in line with our legislative mandate. So we're not going outside of what the law has defined for us to do. So the next steps is that we're going to start drafting the strategies and metrics that go along with those goals. The approach that we're taking is a high level approach of these strategies. We want to be flexible enough to be able to encompass what we could be doing in the next 5 years for NVTA. These statements, these strategies that we're looking at is developing about 4 per goal and detailing statements on how we can achieve that goal. So we're just going to kind of detail a little bit more of how we're going to go into those goals. Examples like that we're kind of working with, and like, let's say for goal number 1, we'd want a strategy that has language to allow us to maintain and evolve our planning processes like transaction, making sure we're able to, do other initiatives underneath that to advance things for the region. For goal number 2, with the project delivery and selection process, we want language that's going to, again, maintain and evolve our funding process, our 6-year program. For goal number 3 on enhancing regional planning through technical assistance and data-driven information, we want to explore opportunities for data sharing and collaboration with regional partners, really providing that Northern Virginia technical assistance. We have MCOG, we have TPP. They do a lot of regional DMV type work. We also have jurisdictions and agencies that can do some work and some can't. We want to fill those gaps and be able to provide those technical assistance on the NVTA level. Modeling is one of the things that we really want to advance and evolve. And then number 4 is our funding goal. We have, something along the lines of continuing our reputation of being a predictable long-term funding partner. So those are just kind of draft strategies that we're working on right now. Our plan is to develop those, and we're going to bring that back to this body. Once we have them laid out, we're going to bring it back to you for input and feedback. And once we kind of work on the strategies, we'll look at the metrics. The metrics we're also looking to take more high-level qualitative. It's really hard as we take this high-level approach on strategies to really outline we're going to do X amount or an X numbers of metrics. So we're going to kind of take a high-level approach, and then we are going to do annual progress updates for the strategic plan. So that's really where the metrics are going to kind of live, is that each year we're going to provide, this is how we're advancing each of the goals. So in terms of the timeline, probably within the next couple meetings, we'll be hashing that out and bringing it to you as the committee to review and provide your inputs. We're looking then to create the entire strategic plan and bring it to the authority in the late fall for their adoption. We want to get this adopted in calendar year 2025. So I said I'd be brief. I hope that was brief enough. I will open it up for questions.
All right, thank you. All right, questions for Ms. Sink?
In terms of
Yes.
providing input, I sounded like you gave sort of like an overall or a very high level strategies, but things that come to mind are like getting better information on, because one of the core values is sustainability. So getting better information on EVs on our road or miles traveled and other things like that, and coordinating that across jurisdictions. And just getting better information and data there. Also things like induced demand and measuring that in a better way. Are those things that we would expect to see in the strategies or metrics eventually? And would that be part of the discussion, or is everything super even higher level than what I just mentioned?
Probably be a higher level than specifically calling out, oh, we're going to look at EVs or we're going to look at that. But we want the strategy to be worded that will allow us to
do that.
Okay. And then in our annual updates, that's where we're going to report in the metric portion. Okay, we outlined this strategy. Here's some of the things we're working to advance that. It might be, we looked at, this feature, we looked at this, and that's where we can get into the quantitative of it.
Okay, so I guess once we see what the draft strategies are specifically, then we can say, hey, this doesn't include this thing that I'm thinking of. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay, and no hands were raised on, okay.
Yeah, I don't see any.
All right, and next NVT update, Ms. Foster.
Madam Chair, thank you. I will be very brief. Just wanted to know, because I've been telling everyone that we have a call for projects that is open covering, it's technically fiscal years 26 to 31, but it's really adding fiscal years 30 and 31. The applications are due August 31st. It is an automated system, and I believe the system closes at 5. Don't wait until 4:59, 4:50, 4:30. Get it in as soon as possible. And then the resolutions of support, which is also quite required from the governing body to support the applications, are due October 31st, again by 5 p.m. But we're strongly encouraging everyone not to wait until the last day, especially towards the latter half of the day. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. See, I'm giving you more time. August 1st for the application and October 31st for the resolution. But we've informed your staff, but I feel like we can't say it enough.
Thank you.
And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, and our next meeting is Wednesday, July 23rd. Are there any final comments? Okay.
Oh, thank you.
I didn't hear that. Motion to adjourn, someone.
Move, so moved.
All right, excellent, all right. Good night. I. Something your nails.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like them too.
Have not.
Great, you're on the opposite side of